The sun poured through the tall windows of the prestigious law firm, casting a warm glow on the polished mahogany desks and the gleaming white walls adorned with framed accolades. Marcus Johnson sat at his desk, meticulously arranging the documents for the day's crucial meeting on a high-profile corporate fraud case. His heart raced with anticipation. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. As he reviewed the case files, his mind whirred with the strategy he planned to employ. Across the room, a group of attorneys gathered for casual banter, their laughter echoing off the walls. Marcus caught snippets of their conversation, the undertones of skepticism wrapping around him like a thick fog. "Do you really think Marcus can handle this case?" one of them said, barely loud enough for him to hear. "I mean, it's a big one. You know how these things go, connections matter." Marcus clenched his jaw, his fingers tightening around the papers he was holding. He had worked hard to earn his place in this firm, yet the whispers of doubt followed him like a shadow. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of being an outsider. He was just as capable, if not more so, than any of his peers. He had the skills, the determination, and the drive to succeed. As the clock ticked closer to the meeting time, Marcus straightened his tie, exuding confidence despite the swirling doubts in his mind. He walked into the conference room, where Richard Blake, the firm's senior partner, stood at the head of the table, his sharp gaze scanning the room. Marcus took a seat among his colleagues, ready to contribute to the discussions. "All right, everyone," Richard began, his authoritative voice cutting through the chatter. "This case is critical for our firm's reputation. We need to strategize effectively." He laid out the details of the case, and Marcus listened intently, eager to share his insights. However, as the discussion progressed, Richard's gaze shifted away from Marcus. "I think we should assign this to Tom," he said, nodding towards a younger, less experienced white attorney. "He has the right connections to pull this off." Marcus felt his heart sink. "Excuse me, Richard," he interjected, his voice steady but edged with frustration. "I believe my experience with corporate fraud cases makes me a strong candidate for this assignment. I've studied the nuances of this case extensively." Richard waved a dismissive hand, his expression unyielding. "Marcus, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we need someone who can leverage the right contacts in this situation. Tom will be able to access resources that you simply don't have." The room fell silent, and Marcus could feel the weight of his colleagues' stares. He forced himself to maintain composure, but inside, a storm brewed. "So, this is about connections, not capability?" he asked, his voice low yet firm. Richard's eyes narrowed. "It's about the best chance for success. I'm sure you understand." As the meeting continued, Marcus's mind raced. The implication was clear. His race mattered more than his qualifications. He bit back his anger, knowing that raising his voice would only reinforce the very bias he sought to combat. Yet, the frustration simmered inside him like a boiling pot, ready to spill over. After the meeting, Marcus stepped out into the bustling New York streets, the weight of the world heavy on his shoulders. He walked aimlessly, feeling the exhaustion of fighting an invisible battle. The city hummed with life. Taxis honked, and pedestrians rushed past, oblivious to the turmoil within him. As he turned a corner, he spotted a community center, its modest exterior a stark contrast to the opulence of his firm. A thought struck him, igniting a flicker of purpose within his chest. Determined not to let the setback define him, Marcus decided to take on a pro bono case. He needed to channel his frustration into something meaningful. Later that evening, Marcus met with Jamal, a young black man who had been wrongfully accused of theft. As he listened to Jamal's story, the pain and injustice in the young man's voice resonated deeply with Marcus. He felt an immediate connection, a shared understanding of the struggles that came with being black in a system that often failed to protect them. "Look, I want to help you," Marcus said, his voice steady and resolute. "We're going to fight this together." Jamal looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "You really think I have a chance?" Marcus nodded, determination etched on his face. "Yes, and I'll do everything I can to prove your innocence." In that moment, Marcus found his purpose. The fight for justice was not just about winning cases. It was about challenging the very biases that had sidelined him. As he left the community center, he felt a renewed sense of strength. This was just the beginning. As Marcus delved deeper into Jamal's case, he found himself navigating a treacherous landscape of systemic bias. The evidence of racial profiling was clear, yet it seemed as if the walls of the legal system were closing in on him. He sat in his cramped office, surrounded by stacks of documents and case files, the flickering fluorescent light overhead casting a harsh glow on his face. The atmosphere felt oppressive, echoing the weight of the injustice he was determined to fight against. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Jamal's mother, a simple plea for hope. "Marcus, is there any news? We're counting on you." The urgency in her words ignited a fire within him. He replied quickly, reassuring her that he was working hard to uncover the truth. The next day, Marcus decided to visit the local precinct where Jamal had been arrested. Clad in his Navy suit, he felt the stares of officers as he entered the building, their eyes narrowing with suspicion. He approached the front desk, where a stern officer greeted him. "What do you want?" the officer asked, his tone brusque. "I'm here to inquire about the arrest of Jamal Harris," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "I believe there are discrepancies in the police report." The officer scoffed, crossing his arms. "You think you could just waltz in here and question our procedures? We don't have time for your games." Marcus felt a surge of frustration, but maintained his composure. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just looking for the truth." "Truth?" the officer repeated mockingly. "You want the truth? The truth is Jamal was caught red-handed. End of story." With that, Marcus understood that he was hitting a wall. The systemic resistance was palpable, the implicit biases woven into the very fabric of the institution. He left the precinct, his resolve hardening. He would not let this dismissive attitude deter him. Back at the office, the buzz of excitement from Richard Blake's team was almost deafening. They were celebrating their latest victory in the corporate fraud case, and the atmosphere was charged with triumph. Marcus watched from a distance, feeling a mix of anger and determination. Richard was holding court, reveling in the praise of upper management, blissfully unaware of the discontent brewing among the junior attorneys. Who knew Blake could pull this off? One of the associates whispered to another, casting a sidelong glance at Marcus. "I mean, did you really expect anything less?" Marcus clenched his jaw, the words stinging. He had poured everything into his cases, and yet here he was, relegated to the sidelines while his colleagues celebrated a success that felt tainted by the very biases he was fighting against. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus found himself in a small cafe, nursing a cup of coffee and reviewing the details of Jamal's case once more. The door chimed, and an elderly man entered, his presence unassuming yet warm. The man shuffled to the counter, and as he caught Marcus's eye, he smiled. "Is everything all right, son?" he asked, settling down at the table next to Marcus. "Just trying to make sense of some things," Marcus replied, his honesty surprising even himself. "Justice can be a long road," the man said, his voice gentle. "But it's a road worth traveling, no matter how hard it gets." Marcus looked up, intrigued by the stranger's insight. "How do you keep going when the odds are stacked against you?" The man leaned back, folding his hands. "You find your strength in the stories of those who've walked before you. There's power in truth, and even when it seems lost, it always finds a way to resurface." Inspired by the man's words, Marcus resolved to dig deeper. He needed a key witness, someone who could confirm Jamal's alibi. He spent the next few days canvassing the neighborhood, speaking to shop owners and residents who might have seen what happened the night Jamal was arrested. At last, he met Clara, the owner of a local convenience store. Her face was lined with experience, her eyes sharp and observant. "I saw it all," she said, her voice steady. "Jamal wasn't anywhere near that place when the theft happened. I remember because I was closing up, and he was helping me carry out some boxes. Would you be willing to testify?" Marcus asked, hope swelling in his chest. Clara hesitated, glancing around as if the walls had ears. "I don't want any trouble. You know how these things go. I understand your fear, but Jamal is innocent. We need your voice in this fight," Marcus urged, feeling the weight of his own convictions pressing down on him. After a moment, Clara nodded slowly. "All right, I'll do it. For him. As they spoke further, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. This could be the turning point in Jamal's case, and with Clara's testimony, perhaps they could expose the injustice that had ensnared not only Jamal but countless others like him. With renewed determination, Marcus set out to prepare for the fight ahead, knowing that change, however daunting, was within reach. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Marcus Johnson stood at the front, his heart pounding in sync with the murmurs of the spectators. The trial for Jamal had commenced, and stakes were high. The prosecutor, a seasoned attorney named Robert Chase, exuded confidence as he approached the jury, his presence commanding attention. Marcus adjusted his tie, steeling himself for the battle ahead. He knew the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders. Jamal's future depended on the outcome of this trial. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Chase began, his voice dripping with condescension. "You will hear a lot of talk about innocence today, but I urge you to remember the facts. Jamal Williams was found at the scene of the crime with stolen goods in his possession. The evidence against him is clear." He turned, flashing a smug smile toward Marcus before returning his gaze to the jury. "Let us not be swayed by emotional appeals." Marcus felt a surge of frustration, but quickly suppressed it. He had prepared for this moment, knowing that Chase would resort to character attacks. As the prosecutor continued his aggressive questioning of witnesses, Marcus remained poised, collecting his thoughts for his own rebuttal. When it was finally his turn to present Jamal's case, he rose from his seat, determination fueling every step. "Your Honor," Marcus addressed the judge, "I would like to remind the court that today we are not just discussing a case of theft. We are here to reveal the truth about Jamal Williams, a young man who has been wrongfully accused." He glanced at Jamal, who sat at the defendant's table, anxiety etched on his face. "I intend to prove that Jamal was a victim of racial profiling, not a perpetrator of crime." The courtroom fell silent, all eyes on Marcus. He called forth the local shopkeeper, a key witness who had seen Jamal at the community center during the time of the alleged theft. As the witness took the stand, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. "Can you describe what you saw that night?" Marcus asked, his voice steady. The shopkeeper cleared his throat. "I remember Jamal clearly. He was helping organize a charity event at the center. There's no way he could have been at the scene of the crime." Chase interjected, "Objection, Your Honor. This witness is biased. He knows Jamal personally." "Your Honor, I am merely trying to establish the credibility of my client," Marcus countered, his eyes narrowing at Chase. The judge, sensing the tension, allowed the witness to continue. With each word, Marcus felt the tide shifting, but he knew he had to remain vigilant. As the trial progressed, an unsettling turn of events awaited Marcus. Outside the courthouse, he received anonymous threats warning him to drop the case. The messages were ambiguous, but laced with menace. They struck a chord of fear deep within him, but he refused to let it deter his mission. That evening, Marcus met with his mentor, Linda, at a quiet cafe. The weight of the day hung heavy on his shoulders as he recounted the threats. "I don't know what to do, Linda. I'm afraid for Jamal and for myself," he admitted, staring into his coffee cup. Linda leaned forward, her expression serious. "Marcus, fear is a tool that those who wish to maintain the status quo will use against you. You mustn't let it silence your voice. Remember why you started this fight." He nodded, her words resonating within him. "You're right. I can't back down now, not when there's so much at stake." As they spoke, Marcus's resolve solidified. He began to gather evidence, documenting instances of racial discrimination he uncovered in Jamal's case and others. The more he dug, the more he unearthed a disturbing trend within the legal system, revealing patterns of bias against black defendants that had gone unnoticed for far too long. "Look at this," he said excitedly, pulling various files from his bag. "I've compiled data from similar cases across the city. The statistics are alarming. We cannot ignore this." Linda examined the papers, her brow furrowing. "This is powerful, Marcus. If you can present this in court, it could change everything." "Exactly. I need to show the jury the bigger picture. How systemic racism is not just a theory, but a reality that impacts lives every day," he said, determination shining in his eyes. With newfound energy, Marcus began to formulate a plan to present this evidence in court. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. This case was no longer just about Jamal. It was about fighting for justice and standing against the systemic issues that plagued their society. He was ready to reclaim his voice and challenge the injustice that had brought him to this point. As the courtroom settled, a palpable tension filled the air. The jurors shifted in their seats, their expressions a mixture of contemplation and uncertainty. Marcus Johnson stood before them, heart racing but resolute. He had prepared for this moment, and he knew it was now or never. With a steady breath, he began his closing argument, his voice strong and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he started, his eyes sweeping across the panel of faces. "Today, you have witnessed not just a trial about a young man accused of theft, but a trial that challenges the very fabric of our justice system. You've seen the evidence, you've heard the testimonies, and now I urge you to look beyond the statistics and see Jamal as he truly is. A human being, an individual with hopes, dreams, and a family that loves him." He paused, allowing his words to resonate. The murmurs in the courtroom faded into silence as the weight of his message settled in. Jamal is not just a number on a police report or a name in a court document. He is a son, a brother, and a friend. He is a young black man who has faced prejudice and discrimination at every turn. The evidence has shown that he was wrongfully accused, that he was a victim of racial profiling. This isn't just about him. It's about all of us. It's about the kind of society we want to live in, one where justice is blind, or one where bias clouds judgment. His voice rose with passion as he continued. "We must not allow fear and prejudice to dictate our decisions. The prosecution has painted Jamal as a criminal, but the truth is, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The real criminals are those who let their biases lead them to accuse an innocent man without a shred of evidence. I ask you to look at the facts, to look at the truth, and to deliver a verdict that reflects justice." As he finished, Marcus stepped back, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the weight of their gazes, the scrutiny of the jury, and the intense anticipation from the spectators filling the gallery. He exchanged a brief glance with Jamal, whose face was a mask of hope and fear. Marcus gave a slight nod of encouragement, silently urging him to stay strong. Hours passed as the jury deliberated. Marcus paced anxiously in the small waiting area outside the courtroom, his mind racing with possibilities. He replayed every moment of the trial, every argument, every piece of evidence he had presented. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. He was acutely aware of the stakes, not just for Jamal, but for himself and for all those who had faced similar injustices. Meanwhile, Richard Blake, the firm's senior partner, had been observing from the back of the courtroom. As Marcus's impassioned closing argument echoed in his mind, Blake felt a shift within himself. He had previously underestimated Marcus, dismissing him based on preconceived notions about race and capability. Now, as he watched Marcus command the room with confidence and conviction, he began to question his previous decisions. Finally, the courtroom doors swung open, and the jury filed back in, their expressions unreadable. Marcus's heart raced as he took his place beside Jamal, who gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white with tension. The judge called for silence, and the foreman stood to deliver their verdict. In the case of the people versus Jamal Thompson, we find the defendant not guilty. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a moment, time stood still. Then, the courtroom erupted into a cacophony of emotion. Jamal's face transformed, tears spilling down his cheeks as relief washed over him. Marcus felt a rush of triumph mixed with disbelief. He turned to Jamal, who leaped from his seat and enveloped him in a tight embrace. "Thank you. Thank you so much," Jamal exclaimed, his voice choked with emotion. "You did it. You really did it." Marcus squeezed him tightly, feeling the weight of the victory wash over them. "This isn't just my victory, Jamal. It's ours. It's for everyone who has ever been wronged by this system. We have to keep fighting." As the courtroom buzzed with excitement, Marcus caught a glimpse of Richard Blake, who stood at the back, a contemplative expression on his face. Blake's mind was racing, filled with thoughts of the implications of this case on his own biases and the future of the firm. He realized that he had a choice to make, one that could redefine his understanding of justice and equity. In that moment, Marcus felt a surge of purpose igniting within him. This was only the beginning. He had uncovered the deep-rooted biases in the legal system, and he was determined to challenge them further. The victory in Jamal's case was a catalyst, a spark that would ignite a larger fight against systemic injustice. As he embraced this newfound mission, he understood that his voice had power, and he was ready to use it for change. With newfound momentum surging through him, Marcus Johnson stood at the precipice of a new chapter in his fight for justice. The courtroom victory in Jamal's case had rekindled a fierce determination within him, igniting a desire to challenge the systemic racism that had long plagued the legal system. As he sat in his office, the walls adorned with accolades he had earned over the years, Marcus felt an insatiable urge to take action. He reached for his phone, dialing the numbers of community leaders and activists who had supported Jamal throughout the trial. "Hey Marcus, what's up?" came the enthusiastic voice of Carla, a prominent figure in the local civil rights movement. "Carla, I'm ready to take this fight further," Marcus said, his voice steady and resolute. "I want to file a civil rights lawsuit against the police department for racial profiling." Jamal's case was just the tip of the iceberg. There was a moment of silence on the line, and Marcus could almost hear Carla's gears turning. "That's a big move, Marcus. You know the pushback you'll face." "I do," he replied. "But we can't let fear dictate our actions anymore. We need to hold them accountable and shed light on the injustices that so many face." "You're right. I'll rally the community leaders. We need to gather support and bring this to the forefront," Carla exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. As they hung up, Marcus felt a rush of adrenaline. He began drafting a press release, outlining the intention to file the lawsuit, and inviting the community to join him in the fight for justice. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, strategy sessions, and outreach. Activists and community leaders rallied behind him, and soon the narrative shifted. The media caught wind of Marcus's endeavor, and the story spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, Richard Blake, the senior partner at Marcus's law firm, watched the developments closely from his office. There was a mixture of surprise and concern etched on his face. He had underestimated Marcus and the impact he could have, not just within the firm but in the broader community. The firm's reputation was at stake, and he needed to act. One afternoon, Richard approached Marcus in the break room, a tentative look on his face. "Marcus, can we talk?" "Sure, Richard. What's on your mind?" Marcus replied, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "I've been following your case against the police department. It's gaining a lot of traction. I want to offer my support," Richard said cautiously. "I think we could collaborate on a diversity initiative at the firm. Help bridge some gaps." Marcus raised an eyebrow, skepticism creeping into his mind. "You mean after sidelining me from the corporate case? Why the sudden change of heart?" Richard rubbed the back of his neck, a sign of his discomfort. "I see the value you bring, Marcus. I was wrong before. I underestimated you. This is an opportunity for us to make real change, not just in the firm, but in the community." Marcus studied Richard's face for a moment, searching for sincerity. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to see action, not just words. If we're going to do this, it has to be genuine." "I understand," Richard nodded, his expression earnest. "Let's work together. I want to support you however I can." With the lawsuit officially filed, the stage was set for a legal battle that would attract national attention. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus prepared for the inevitable confrontation with the powerful legal teams representing the police department. He meticulously gathered evidence, interviewing witnesses and compiling testimonies that revealed a shocking pattern of racial bias within the force. On the day of the preliminary hearing, Marcus arrived early at the courthouse, the weight of the moment heavy on his shoulders. He stood before the large wooden doors, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, reporters milling about, cameras flashing as they prepared to capture history in the making. As he entered the courtroom, He was met with the sight of opposing counsel, a group of seasoned attorneys, their expressions steely and confident. Marcus knew they would fight tooth and nail to protect the department's reputation. He took his seat at the plaintiff's table, surrounded by community leaders and supporters who had come to witness the proceedings. As the hearing commenced, Marcus stood to present the evidence he had gathered, his voice firm and unwavering. He laid out the statistics, the testimonies, and the undeniable truth of the racial profiling that had plagued the community. The tension in the room was palpable as he articulated the profound impact these practices had on individuals and families, making them feel less than human. This isn't just about one case, Marcus asserted, his voice rising with passion. This is about a systemic failure that has unjustly affected countless lives. We are here to demand accountability and justice for all those who have suffered in silence. The audience listened intently, and for the first time, Marcus felt as though he was not just an attorney but a voice for the voiceless. As the hearing progressed, the stakes grew higher, and Marcus's commitment to the fight for justice deepened, knowing that this was only the beginning. The courtroom buzzed with an electric tension, the air thick with anticipation. Marcus Johnson stood at the front, his heart racing as he prepared to present the most crucial evidence of his career. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the bridge of her nose, called for order, her gavel striking the wooden bench with authority. We will now hear the closing arguments in the case of Johnson v. the City Police Department. Marcus took a deep breath, grounding himself in the weight of the moment. He glanced at Jamal, who sat amongst his family, their eyes filled with hope. The gallery was packed, a sea of faces representing the community that had rallied behind him, eager for justice. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice steady but rising in intensity. "Today we confront more than just the fate of my client, Jamal. We confront a system that has been allowed to operate in shadows, a system that has systematically oppressed individuals based solely on the color of their skin." He presented photographs and documents, each piece of evidence meticulously curated to illustrate the pattern of racial profiling that plagued the police department. "These aren't just statistics," Marcus continued, pacing slightly as he spoke. "These are real lives, lives like Jamal's, who was wrongfully accused, stripped of dignity, and subjected to an unjust criminal system that treats him as a suspect rather than a person." The jury shifted, some scribbling notes, others nodding slowly in understanding. As he wrapped up his argument, Marcus felt a surge of passion. Justice must not only be served, it must be seen to be served. We have an opportunity here, right now, to send a message that discrimination will not be tolerated in our communities. We owe it to Jamal, to his family, and to every individual who has faced similar injustices. We can change the narrative. He stepped back, allowing his words to settle like dust in the air. Just as the prosecution began its rebuttal, the courtroom doors swung open, and a figure stepped inside. Everyone turned, a ripple of surprise spreading through the room. It was Officer Clara Thompson, a member of the very department Marcus was accusing. Her face was pale, but there was a resolve in her eyes that drew every gaze. She approached the witness stand, the murmurs in the room growing louder. "Objection!" the prosecutor shouted. "This witness has not been called by either side." "I wish to testify," Clara said firmly, her voice cutting through the commotion. "I have something important to say." The judge, taken aback but intrigued, nodded for her to proceed. "I've been a police officer for over a decade," Clara began, her voice trembling slightly. "And I've seen things I can no longer ignore. We have protocols in place that encourage racial profiling. I've witnessed officers targeting black individuals for no reason other than the color of their skin." She took a deep breath, meeting Marcus's eyes briefly before continuing. "I was part of a cover-up involving wrongful arrests and reports that were falsified to protect the department's reputation. I can't stay silent anymore." The courtroom fell into a stunned silence, the weight of her confession settling heavily on everyone present. Marcus's heart raced with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Thank you, Officer Thompson," he said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. "What you've done today takes immense courage, and it strengthens our case immeasurably." This is the truth that has been buried for too long. As the trial drew to a close, the jury deliberated, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Finally, the foreman stood, his expression grave. "We find the police department liable for racial discrimination." A wave of emotion crashed through the gallery. Jamal's family erupted into tears of joy, while Marcus felt a profound sense of relief wash over him. In the immediate aftermath, Richard Blake emerged from the back of the courtroom, his demeanor transformed. "Marcus," he said, his voice carrying a note of respect, "I've underestimated you. Your work, your dedication, it's remarkable. You've shown us all what true justice looks like." Marcus nodded, a smile breaking through the tension. He had fought not just for Jamal, but for an entire community seeking recognition and justice. This victory was a testament to resilience, a pivotal moment that would inspire change. He felt the weight of the world lift slightly from his shoulders, knowing that he had taken a significant step toward addressing the systemic issues that plagued the legal system. Standing tall in the courtroom, Marcus embraced Jamal, whose tears of joy mixed with relief. "We did it, man," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is just the beginning." And in that moment, he felt the fire of justice ignite within him, ready to face the battles ahead, determined to be a voice for the voiceless.